Well, episode 58 of Dragon Ball Super is in the books, and it is time for my review. So without wasting any more time, let's get straight into this mysterious and eerie episode review of Dragon Ball Super. So let's start off with some key plot elements to discuss. First off, obviously going back from the previous episode, Zamasu is heading over to Zuno to find out more about the Super Dragon Balls. But interestingly enough, in this scenario, he doesn't just want to find out about the Super Dragon Balls, he also wants to find out more about Goku. And obviously, by seeing this, a lot of people are obviously expecting that he's trying to possibly create Black Goku in what would have been the present timeline. And I'm going to talk a lot more about the whole timeline disparities later on in this video. But the interesting thing is that in this scenario, Zuno is not killed by Zamasu, and obviously a lot of people could have expected this, but there was some speculation going into the episode preview that he would have killed Zuno, because there was this quick clip where you saw like a slash near Zuno's neck, and everybody thought he would have killed him in, obviously threatening him to get his information. Now, obviously, there's two things going on in this episode once again. After Zuno tries to find information about where the Super Dragon Balls are and who Goku is, we go back to our heroes, and we see that they're still obviously injured from their recent fight against Black and Zamasu. Now, here's something where I have a quick nitpick, but it's not a negative nitpick, it's more of a story element that has kind of gone on since Dragon Ball, really. There's a lack of tension in Dragon Ball when it pertains to the Sensu beans. And I understand that the Sensu beans are obviously there in the story so that they can quickly heal characters. But if you think about it from a plot point of view, these guys literally just went on a dangerous mission to the future to go fight against Zamasu and Black. They ended up failing. They were so badly beaten up that Mai had to operate the time machine just for them to go back in time. And then, oh, no problem, just 3 quick sensu beans just heals them up. I'm not complaining about this, I'm not nitpicking, I'm just saying that I feel like that kind of took away from the element of the episode, because it's like, okay, they're just back to normal, as opposed to really feeling the dynamic effect of how they failed to accomplish their mission. So that's just one story element I wanted to point out about the story elements of Dragon Ball. But obviously, in continuing the discussions about Black and Zamasu and talking about everything that happened to them, we see later on in the episode that the Supreme Kai actually arrives on Earth with both Beerus and Whis. And I found this was kind of interesting because at the beginning of Battle of Gods, or the Battle of Gods arc for Dragon Ball Super, it kind of seemed like Beerus and Whis would, travel to Earth, on a seldom notion. They wouldn't always come, but it's kind of funny because of Whis now and their relationship. It's like Beerus and Whis are just coming all the time to just chill with the Z Fighters and whatever they're doing. So I just thought that was kind of cool. And now that we see that the Supreme Kai is actually there, he's pretty much telling them that Zuno is pretty much sent him a message telling him how a person visited him to find out about the Super Dragon Balls and Goku Black. Now here is where things get interesting. Right after this, Goku actually theorizes that Zamasu used the Super Dragon Balls to make Black Goku. And obviously, there was a lot of fan theories that have gone into this too, into how Black was created in the first place. And it does make sense that Zamasu would somehow get a hold of the Super Dragon Balls to create Black, because Black wouldn't have even have existed in the future timeline. And I'm going to talk a lot more about that in just one second. But that does make a lot of sense. And Whis continues this discussion by saying that, maybe he didn't necessarily just revive Goku, but he kind of just made Goku like a copy, as like a servant towards him. And that can make sense because Zamasu could have somehow trained or powered up Goku Black into being as strong as he was if he's using, whatever Goku's body for the basis. And the interesting thing about all of this is that Beerus himself theorizes that Zamasu pretty much, because of the fact that the Super Dragon Balls require a year to, before you can use them again, he theorizes that Beerus uses the time rings to pretty much go into the future so that he doesn't have to wait for the actual period of time where everybody would have, obviously been waiting for the Super Dragon Balls to use, and he would have killed Gowasu in the process, which is something I've been saying since day one. not because of plot purposes, but because of the fact that it just doesn't make sense for Gowasu to be alive, because Zamasu has to somehow get control. So now that we have all of this narrating out of the way, let's go more into the actual discussion about the timelines. My friend James Krasnerick and I were having a huge debate about, is this Zamasu the present or the future Zamasu? Are they the same person? And I still strongly believe that this Zamasu has to be different from the one from the future. It just has to be. And I have some problems, I have a solution, and I have a lot of things to discuss. So here's the climax of this video. Don't make a sexual joke. So the first problem with the fact that Zamasu cannot be the one from the future is, if Zamasu was the one from the future, how did he get his hands on the time rings, which we saw him having in the future? And how was Gowasu Orezi supposedly killed in the future? And how would this Gowasu be alive now? The only way this would be possible is if Gowasu was killed in the future, if he wasn't killed now. It just doesn't make any sense for them to be talking about a guy who already has the time rings when he already would have had him in the future. A. B. Why would Beerus say he fears for Gowasu's life? If Gowasu's life was already possibly taken in the future, he is obviously saying this in a notion to prevent the future from happening. So pretty much he's saying that he wants to take out Zamasu before he can take all of that action towards killing Gowasu in the future. So it's kind of like a premonition of stopping what is said to happen. But if it already happened and this is one Zamasu, it wouldn't make any sense. C. Why would Zamasu look for Zuno to give him answers about the Super Dragon Balls if he already had accomplished his goal in the future? That honestly to me doesn't make any sense. D. Call this a little bit of an insider, but the Dragon Ball Super episode 58 spoiler preview, and guys, this isn't a spoiler anymore because the episode is already aired, it actually mentioned that Zamasu was present day Zamasu. So obviously we're going back and forth here between comparing both Zamasus, but the key fact of the matter is that future Zamasu was shown with the green Potara, whereas this Zamasu was shown with orange Potara earrings. And it really honestly doesn't make any sense when you look at the fact that Zamasu, who obviously met Goku for the first time in our time period, how would Black have already existed in the future when both the future and the present are pretty much taking place at the same time, just in two different timelines? That to me doesn't make any sense how we would have even have had the green Potara earrings anyways. So I'm going to present to you guys two dilemmas and one solution towards this whole argument. I know guys, this is like a super theoretical super review, but I figured we should talk about it. The dilemma is, how can Zamasu of the future even be aware of Goku and his strength if he was dead? Now, this is something that I can't explain yet, but when you look at the fact that Goku in Trunks' timeline was significantly weaker before he died than this present time Goku, it's very hard to believe how Black could have been as strong as what he was. And plus, how would Zamasu have even have been aware of Goku in the first place, considering the fact that Goku would have been dead for a very long time? Even though it's hard to believe, and even though when you consider Zamasu's from Universe 10, it's honestly easier to believe that Zamasu could have somehow trained the copy Goku than to actually believe what I'm about to tell you right now. So guys, here we go to the solution. Unless you can say, and this is a Qaaman theory, unless you can say that Trunks' timeline is a direct result of what is going to happen in the present that we are seeing right now, this has its own problem. So let me clean that wording up a little bit for you guys. The Trunks timeline that we know had a completely different path of events and a lot of different butterfly effects and divergences than the present. So because of that very nature, it is impossible that we can affect future Trunks' timeline from the present events that we have, considering the fact that future Trunks' timeline is at a different complete point of time, and the obvious evidence for this would have been the fact that Trunks is significantly older than the present timeline Trunks that we know. So when you factor that in, it is impossible that the present that we have can affect the future Trunks' timeline, and it makes no sense because they're not linked. The present timeline that we know was already altered from the future Trunks that came back to change history, in addition to also altering it with Cell. And I know that this is making timelines super complicated. If you want to get a better explanation for all of this, guys, go check out my alternate timeline theory. But I honestly think it literally makes absolutely no sense for the present Zamasu to be the same one as the future. I stand by my argument. This was a different iteration of my super reviews that I usually do, but I definitely feel like it was necessary for me to talk about as people, you know, were asking me on Twitter and what's not. So now when we go back to the actual episode itself instead of all this timeline stuff, let's go back to the scene where after all of this is happening, we go back to the future and we see Mai and Yajirobe pretty much running back to the resistance base, and we see both Maki, Haru, Mai, and Yajirobe. And I felt that it was interesting to seeing like the kids asking about Trunks, because it really shows you the impact and the admiration that a lot of these characters have for Trunks. Like, he's literally like their lone hero, and considering that there's really nobody in the future who can really defend them that has abnormal power, it kind of makes sense. So I thought that was a nice little, you know, mesmerable scene. And let's also talk about some of the action elements of this episode. There really wasn't any action sequences. I mean, I guess you could say when Zamasu was kind of bullying Zuno, but in terms of animation, I thought the episode was decent. The episode didn't really have to have the best animation because there really were no fight sequences. So it's really nothing to really complain about. And to talk about something that I've always kind of wanted to discuss in this episode, in the subject of sensu beans, as I mentioned before, have you guys ever wondered if sensu beans have always been this thing that can grant people the ability to just heal from anything that happens? Have you ever wondered, why don't they just ask Shenron or Porunga or any dragon to just give them an unlimited supply of sensu beans? And you pretty much have like thousands of sensu beans at one time, so you never will run out. Like, no matter what happens, you will always have a sensu bean with you. That's something I've always kind of wondered. And kind of wonder why they would never have considered it in Dragon Ball. But to move on to my other interesting detail that I noticed, are the Pilaf gang allies with the Z Fighters now? Like, are they like friends? Because it seems like the Pilaf gang kind of always has like their little mini motives to like taking over the earth or accomplishing their own goals, but it seems like they're kind of friends with everybody now, and it kind of further emphasized this thing where in Dragon Ball we always have like these villains that eventually become the good guys, and I think that's kind of cool, especially because the Pilaf gang is pretty much irrelevant at this point. So with everything said, the last interesting detail that I wanted to point out is that we saw, to further emphasize this whole future Zamasu versus present Zamasu thing, at the end of the episode we saw Zamasu pretty much walking around, you know, the Supreme Kai planet in Universe 10, and he looks like he's just delivering tea once again as usual. And this further emphasized the point that if this was the Zamasu of the future, this stuff should have already have happened. So I definitely want you guys to really take what I say about this whole future versus present Zamasu thing, and I hope I made this a lot easier for you guys to understand that I just seriously don't think this could have been the same Zamasu as the one from the future. And I want to hear your thoughts. If you think I'm talking shit, if you think I'm, you know, actually speaking with evidence or like points to support my argument, please say so. I don't get offended by it, just tell me your thoughts. So with everything said, I thought this was a decent episode that creates a lot of sense of mystery and interest for the show, and I'm gonna have to give it 4 stars. The episode did what it did. The episode kind of recovered from the big fight that we just had, and I also like the fact that this episode, you know, kind of made this whole Zamasu Black and the future one bigger mystery to being solved. So with everything else said, guys, going into my predictions, courtesy of Geekdom spoilers, since I'm aware of what will happen in the upcoming episodes, I'm gonna narrow my predictions down to a few specifics because I kind of already know what's gonna happen. In terms of Gowasu, I project that from the looks of the preview, that the rest of the gang are going to analyze him to see what's going on, and they ultimately will make a mistake. My prediction is that Zamasu is going to kill Gowasu at the very end of the episode, and the reason why I'm making this claim is because if you look at the end of the preview, you could see Goku in a fighting stance, whereas the preview was also showing that Goku was kind of like analyzing him with Whis. So why would Goku all of a sudden get into a fighting stance, and who else would Goku be fighting at this point of time? It would have to be Zamasu, because Zamasu made some type of move, and that's my prediction. So I based this on the expression that he had coupled with Goku's fighting position, and that's really all I have for the predictions for today. So with everything else said, please remember to rate, comment, and subscribe. And remember, as I always say, to have a great day, guys. And I have a video dropping on Wednesday about Whis. It's a big video, guys, and I want you guys to stay tuned for 5 p.m. Eastern time. Have a great day, everyone.